guys, welcome back, Bushcraft family, with another video. Today we're going to talk about livestock. Some of the things that our grandparents would have had during the Great Depression. If your family was from, the country. If not, they had to stay in line in the cities for a very long time to get just barely necessities or just a bowl of soup. And that soup was probably just broth. People in the cities had it way worse than country folk did. I know for a fact that my grandpa was not a city folk, so he had, all the necessities and whatnot. I still remember the things that he had when I was there, and that's the same things that he had during the Depression. Now, for preppers, it's kind of, one of those things that it would be, to have animals would be like a long-term survival plan. We have shelves full of canned food, and, stash of, canned chili or canned soup or whatever that we have made over the years. But eventually that'll all go away, because if you don't have a way to reproduce that food, it'll go away. And that's where, the animals came in, the livestock. Milk and eggs were a replenishable resource that you could have over and over again. And a lot of this is just not in the United States. During World War I and World War II, a lot of these animals, livestock, was in the UK too. And they did the same thing that we did, because money wasn't growing on trees per se. Times were tough. And another way to get food during the Depression was hunting. And during that time, game was very scarce. It's not like what you see now. They're crossing the roads and this and that. Deer population was very slim. Rabbit, squirrel, you'd very, very seldom see those, because they were overhunted, because so many people needed to eat. Meat wasn't a normal thing that was on the table. Like nowadays, we eat it every day, every meal and everything. Back then, it was like, oh, what's this? There's something new in our soup. Is that meat? Yeah. But I wanted to go over some of the livestock that our grandparents may have had on the farm, or homestead, or whatever you want to call it. Our first one, everybody will probably remember these, is chickens. Yeah, chickens are pretty easy animals, as long as you keep the predators away. They're really good. You can let them out in the yard, and they'll free range and eat the bugs up, and keep the grass trimmed for the most part. they're pretty much their own little self producing food source. Not only do they give you eggs, but they can actually, you can eat the chicken yourself too, as long as you have a way for those birds to reproduce. It's a plentiful source. And again, like I said, those eggs, they can lay, 1 to 2 eggs a week to 300 a year. That is a lot of eggs for one chicken. Now, if you have multiple chickens, which you usually do, that's a lot of eggs. And there's ways of, storing those eggs. And nowadays, when you get eggs from the grocery store, they're washed and cleaned and put in refrigeration, because once you clean an egg, clean that protective shell over the outside. I'm not talking about the little hard shell that protects it, but there's an invisible layer around that. If you don't clean that off and you just store those eggs, you don't even have to put them in the refrigerator, and they can last weeks. Outside of the refrigerator, it's when you clean them, they lose that protection little barrier. And like I said, chickens will eat scrap. So any scrap that you might have, peelings from vegetables or old vegetables, which didn't happen very often if you had vegetables turn bad because everything got ate. Again, chickens are a wonderful resource for protein and whatnot. Our next one was rabbits. Rabbits are very, very good little critters. I have some of my own in the backyard that you can use for meat. They reproduce pretty well about every 6 months. You'll get a big batch of or a big litter. I think they call them litters. I'm not sure. But you can get 3 to 6 to 12 rabbits every 6 months, depending what you're feeding them. And you can forage weeds and whatnot to feed them, let alone whatever grain and whatnot you would be growing. But like rabbits or like chickens, rabbits are very cheap to feed. Scraps, parts of vegetables that you wouldn't normally eat and whatnot, they'll eat that stuff up. And again, foraging weeds, grass, there's so much that rabbits will eat. You can kind of free range them, per se, keep them in their cages and move the cages like a chicken tractor, something like that, where they'll clean out the vegetation around a certain area. And again, rabbits they reproduce so much that it's real easy to care for. And unlike chickens, where they need to roam a little bit to forage for food and stuff, rabbits, a lot of times they would just make a rabbit hutch and stick them right outside their windows. There's your food source right there. Our next one, this I didn't know, and I did a little research on it. It makes a lot of sense. Pigeons, yeah, not only for the meat, but you can also eat the eggs. They don't lay as many eggs as chickens or anything like that, but they do produce eggs, and the bird itself doesn't take that long to get up to full grown pigeon. And there's not a lot of meat there, but if you could have quite a few birds, they would very well produce quite a bit of them. Duh. I'm sorry. Brain fart. Anyways, pigeons are really good because not only it doesn't take much to feed them, they will go out and forage for themselves. And once they get a nest established, they'll fly back at nighttime and nest. And when morning comes, they'll go out and get their food, come back. Only time you would have to feed them would be, if you start seeing them, their sizes get smaller toward the wintertime and whatnot, to where food is scarce. But pigeons, never thought that was like a meat source that they used as a crop. And as I say, a crop, livestock, but yeah. Our next one, commonly, it's a pig. Yeah, pigs. Pigs are a bit harder, just because of the area they need. Pigs need actual water to cool off. Summertime comes, you need to spray them down, whatnot, because they do sweat and whatnot, and they overheat very easily. So it's a little bit harder to keep these animals. They do forage, so they'll eat plants, worms, small animals, pretty much anything. So as long as they start fattening up and whatnot, it's not too bad. Now, when it comes to harvesting said pig, it is a little tough. It's a big job. So unless you're used to something like that, and back then they didn't have so much of refrigerators and stuff like that. So when they slaughtered something like this, they had to have plans set in place ahead of time how they would preserve all this food. Be it canning, salting, smoking, you name it, they did it. And our next one. Now, I would have really thought that goats would have been more on the market than this animal, sheep. A lot of people in the Depression, they didn't have them goats, or they did have goats, but not as many goats as they did sheep. Sheep are, they would clear fields and whatnot. They were a daily grazer and whatnot. Sheep were never, or still not really the smartest thing. They get stuck on things. They get lost and whatnot. That's where it's good to have a good dog and everything. But it's a very easy meat to grow. I'm sorry, but plus you have another resource. You have that wool that clothes were made out of. A lot of times, the women of these homesteads, they didn't go to grocers or supermarkets and clothing stores and buy new clothes. A lot of times back in the Depression, they made their own clothes, plain and simple. There was no going and buying new clothes every week and getting new outfits and all this stuff. You had Sunday dress and you had work clothes, and work clothes were probably the same clothes you would wear for a whole week. Sunday, you wore them one day. When you got home, you put them up and you wore them the next week. So, having a source in wool, you would make your own clothing. But again, every year you would get one or two lambs that you can use for meat. And like I said, I really thought it would have been more goats would have been higher on this list, but sheeps were over the goats. And I'm not saying nobody had goats or anything, but I remember my grandpa having goats, but it wasn't like a herd of goats. We never had sheep either, but we had the chickens, pigs, and goats. And you can't forget cows in this list. Very surprising, cows were under the list of sheep. Yeah, I would have thought cows would have been higher up, but it was rare to find homesteads that would actually have cows. And I said cows because normally you need the male and the female to make the baby, the calf, and that was what set the cow to produce milk and whatnot. So I know for experience that at one point we did have a cow, and if it needed, there's a certain time of the season where we would plan when the calf would be born. We would go to neighbors and have the cow bred, bring it back to our place, and it would start eventually producing milk once the baby calf was born and whatnot. And it wasn't so much that we would use the animal or the cow for meat. It was used for milk, and with milk you would make the cheese and the butter and just regular milk to drink. That's just the way it was, but nowadays everything's so, you go to the store and it's there. It's magically on a shelf. And this day and time, you go to middle schools or whatnot. Don't worry about going to the elementaries or anything like that. You go to the higher grades and whatnot, and you ask them, where do eggs come from? Oh, that's usually in the back of the aisle at the grocery store. Kids today, and I'm talking about city kids, we know, there's kids from the country. They know where all that stuff comes from because they have to, they're the ones that go out in the morning and collect the eggs, and when they do all the chores, so they know where all this stuff comes from. But The city kids that's been sheltered all their lives, their parents have been sheltered. When it comes to, food, where's it come from? Oh, it comes from a store. Yeah, and where do you get the hamburger from? I get my hamburgers from McDonald's. That's my favorite place. That's the whole thinking now. It's they don't have a clue. They've been so sheltered, and food gets delivered to your door now. What happens? That gets taken away. You're going to have so many people that don't know anything that's going to be begging for food a few days, after, they pick up a phone and nobody brings them food. What are they going to do? They don't know any better. It's going to be bad. I'm not saying something like this will happen, but if it did, how would they survive? Now, people that have homesteads and stuff, it'll be a normal day. Well, go out and collect the eggs. We'll have some scrambled eggs or French toast for breakfast. Yeah, it'll be a normal thing. And surprisingly, that is the thing that they want to get rid of. They want to get rid of the people that know how to take care of themselves. They want those people to be, the sheep, the ones that'll stand in line for hours to get a bowl of soup. Those are the ones that are easy to control. And that's the way it was in the Depression. It was, you had people that lived in the cities that didn't have no means to get food or whatnot, so they had to rely on soup kitchens and bread lines and things like that. A lot of people didn't make it in them cities. Well, I'm going to end this here. Let me know. You have stories about your grandparents or that lived in those times, the Great Depression, and it could have been from World War I all the way through World War II, because there was like over in UK, they actually rationed a lot of the food. You could only get so many eggs per week. You were lucky to get milk or anything like that. Unless you had these places, your own farms and stuff. But yeah, let me know down in the comments. Until next time, God bless.